So come full circle, the idea of the Trinity was already within the cultural context before Jesus had ever been born. Within regard to the concept of Binitarianism, before Christ came, there were many thoughts already on the identity of the second Yahweh. Some believed it was Enoch, who walked with God and had been transformed into an angel. Some believed it was Jacob. Some believed it was Moses. Others believed it could have been the archangel Michael, or an angel named Yahoel. I just wanted to add this section and show evidence that this indeed was the case, and we will be using text from the Apocrypha and the Pseudepigrapha in order to demonstrate it. Scholars look for 5 things when considering who this second Yahweh, or in academic terms, the Exalted Vice-Regent, is being identified as. The 5 tests used in order to determine whether a selected candidate is indeed being exalted to that level by the Second Temple Jewish writers are: 1. Divine position. Is the figure with or near God and his throne? 2. The divine appearance. Is the figure described in the same way as God's physical form in the Hebrew Bible? So let's just review what it is that God looked like, or at the very least described to look like. Exodus 24, 9 through 11. Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet as if it were a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. And he did not lay his hand on the chief men of the people of Israel. They beheld God, and ate and drank. The next passage we'll be looking at is Ezekiel 1, 26 through 28. There was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like sapphire, and seated above the likeness of a throne was a likeness with the human appearance. And upward, from what had the appearance of his waist, I saw as it were gleaming metal, like the appearance of fire, enclosed all around. And downward, from what had the appearance of his waist, I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and there was brightness around him, like the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud on the day of rain. So was the appearance of the brightness all around. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and heard the voice of one speaking. The next passage we'll look at is Daniel 7, verse 9. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Here we can see John in Revelation describing Jesus in like terms. Revelation 1, 14 through 15. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. The next test is divine functions. Does the figure perform actions typically ascribed to God, such as being eternal, forgiving sins, bringing order to chaos, or creation? The next test is the divine name. Does the figure bear the name of Yahweh, or is he described as a hypostasis of the name? This is not to be confused with theophory, although it is at times applicable in some of these cases. Theophory is the practice of embedding the name of a god into a proper name. For instance, the angel Michael, the suffix of the name being El, the name itself meaning who is like God, or the name Joab, meaning Yahweh is Father. However, this is not really what we are talking about in this context. Within the scope of our context, when we say bear the divine name, we are referring to God's divine presence. A hypostasis would be defined as multiple personages sharing one essence. Thus we get the hypostatic union of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The final test is divine veneration. Is the figure worshipped, or is prayer offered to the figure? So let's run through some of the exalted humans that we find whose authors of the books within the Pseudepigrapha believe may have filled this divine regent slot. We will begin with the very first man, Adam. We find in Slavonic Enoch 30, 11 through 12 that Adam was identified as an angel and ruler over God's creation. from invisible and visible substances I created man. From both his natures come both death and life, and as my image he knows the world like no other creature. But even at his greatest he is small, and again at his smallest he is great. And on the earth I assigned him to be a second angel, honored and great and glorious. And I assigned him to be a king, to reign on the earth, and to have my wisdom. And there was nothing comparable to him on the earth, even among my creatures that exist. We also find in the life of Adam and Eve that God had informed his angels to bow down and worship Adam, the image of the Lord. Yet Satan resisted this request. And Michael went out and called all the angels, saying, Worship the image of the Lord God, as the Lord God hath instructed. And Michael himself worshipped first, and called me and said, Worship the image of God, Yahweh. And I answered, I do not worship Adam. And when Michael kept forcing me to worship, I said to him, Why do you compel me? I will not worship one inferior and subsequent to me. I am prior to him in creation, before he was made. I was already made. He ought to worship me. Adam is also described as terrifying, adorned in glory, and seated upon a throne in the Testament of Abraham, chapter 11, verses 4 through 9. And outside the two gates of that place, they saw a man seated on a golden throne. And the appearance of that man was terrifying, like the master's. And they saw many souls being driven by angels and being led through the broad gate. And they saw a few other souls, and they were being brought by angels through the narrow gate. And when the wondrous one, who was seated on the throne of gold, saw few entering through the strait gate, but many entering through the broad gate, immediately that wondrous man tore his hair of his head and the beard of his cheeks, and he threw himself on the ground from his throne, crying and wailing. And when he saw many souls entering through the strait gate, then he arose from the earth and sat on his throne, very cheerfully, rejoicing and exulting. Then Abraham asked the commander-in-chief, My lord commander-in-chief, who is this most wondrous man who is adorned in such glory? And sometimes he cries and wails, while other times he rejoices and exults. Then Corporal One said, This is the first-formed Adam, who is in such glory, and he looks at the world since everyone has come from him. These accounts may have been the inspiration for this 14th century manuscript called the Kebra Nagas. Speaking of Adam, it states, And he seated the body of Adam upon the throne of his Godhead, and magnified him, and exalted him, and honored him. And he was praised by all the beings whom he had created, the angels and the archangels, thousands of thousands, and 10,000s of 10,000s of spiritual beings. Enoch is also presented in many texts as the vice-regent. We see him called Son of Man in 1 Enoch, which would link him as the Son of Man in Daniel chapter 7. 1 Enoch 71, 11 through 14. I fell on my face, my whole body mollified, and my spirit transformed. Then I cried with a great voice by the Spirit of the power, blessing, glorifying, and extolling. And those are the blessings which went forth out of my mouth, being well-pleasing in the presence of the antecedent of time. The antecedent of time came with Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, and 100,000 and 10 million times 100,000 angels that are countless. Then an angel came to me and greeted me and said to me, You, Son of Man, who art born in righteousness and upon whom righteousness has dwelt, the righteousness of the antecedent of time will not forsake you. 2 Enoch 22 also describes this transformation of Enoch into a divine being. The Lord said to Michael, Take Enoch and extract him from the earthly clothing, and anoint him with delightful oil, and put him into clothes of glory. And Michael extracted me from my clothes. He anointed me with the delightful oil. The appearance of that oil is greater than the greatest light. Its ointment is like sweet dew, and its fragrance like myrrh, and its shining is like the sun. And I gazed at all of myself, and I had become like one of the glorious ones, and there was no observable difference. This is further illustrated within 3rd Enoch. Within this text, Enoch is exalted into a divine being himself called Metatron. 3rd Enoch 1:4. At once the Holy One, blessed be he, summoned to my aid his servant, the angel Metatron, prince of the divine presence. Enoch's transformation into Metatron is also verified in chapter 12. He is then called the Lesser Yahweh and the Angel of the Cloud. 3 Enoch 12, 1-5. Our Ishmael said, Metatron, prince of the divine presence, said to me, out of the love which he had for me, more than all of the denizens of the heights, the Holy One, blessed be he, fashioned for me a majestic robe, in which all kinds of luminaries were set, and he clothed me in it. He fashioned for me a glorious cloak, in which brightness, brilliance, splendor, and luster of every kind were fixed, and he wrapped me in it. He fashioned for me a kingly crown, in which refulgent stones were placed, each like the sun's orb, and its brilliance shone into the four quarters of the heavens of Erebot, into the seven heavens, and into the four quarters of the world. He set it upon my head, and he called me the Lesser Yahweh, in the presence of his whole household in the height, as it is written, my name is in him, which is a clear reference to Exodus 23:21. It is also referenced in 3 Enoch 48/D, verse 1. Metatron has 70 names, and these are they: 1. Yahoel, Yah. 90. Lesser Yahweh, after the name of his master, as it is written, my name is in him. We will see a bit later his first name, Yahoel, is also very significant. His transformation is further described within the text 48/C, verses 6-7. I turn his flesh to fiery torches, and all the bones of his body to coals of light. I made the appearance of his eyes like the appearance of lightning, and light of his eyes like light unfailing. I caused his face to shine like the brilliant light of the sun, the brightness of his eyes like the brilliance of the throne of glory. I made honor, majesty, and glory his garment, beauty, pride, and strength his outer robe, and a kingly crown, 500 times 500 parsonages his diadem. I bestowed on him some of my majesty, some of my magnificence, some of my splendor of my glory, which is on the throne of glory, and I called him by my name, the Lesser Yahweh, Prince of the Divine Presence, knower of secrets. Every secret I have revealed to him in love, every mystery I have made known to him in uprightness. There is also clear examples that this text was created to deal with the claims of Christianity as well. For instance, it deals specifically with the claim of the two powers of heaven in favor of Judaism. It asserts a more strict monotheism when Metatron is called the second power. In 3 Enoch chapter 16, 3-5 we read, Then he opened his mouth and said, There are indeed two powers in heaven. Immediately a divine voice came out from the presence of the Shekinah and said, Come back to me, apostate sons, apart from me a hair. Then an Epiquel, Yahweh, the honored, glorified, beloved, wonderful, terrible, and dreadful Prince, came at the command of the Holy One, blessed be he, and struck me with 60 lashes of fire, and made me stand to my feet. It's kind of amusing, but we can clearly see Metatron is attacked for an individual, even suggesting there is two powers, just to refute the claim. In John 1:18 we read, No man has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him. The term, the only begotten Son, comes from the Greek word Strong's G3439, monogenes. Scholars have traditionally translated this as the only begotten Son. However, due to the new discoveries of ancient Greek papyri, many scholars now assert that the correct translation would read the unique Son. This is probably a more accurate translation. If we turn to Hebrews 11:17, we will find Isaac is called the monogenes of Abraham. By faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promise offered up his only begotten son. We know that Isaac was not Abraham's only son. In fact, Abraham had Ishmael before Isaac. Therefore, it is better understood that Isaac was Abraham's unique son. Why? Because Isaac was the son of the promise. With this bit of background, we can better understand the claims of Metatron in this verse, dealing with the claims against Jesus. 3rd Enoch 48/D verse 9 calls Enoch the monogenes. But their minds were not set at ease until the Holy One, blessed be he, rebuked them and drove them out of his presence with a rebuke, saying to them, I wished, I desired, I ordered it, and entrusted it to Metatron, my servant alone, because he is unique among all the denizens of the heights. From the Dead Sea Scrolls, scroll 11Q13, titled The Coming of Melchizedek, the writer designates Melchizedek as a plausible vice-regent, and about him makes some very profound statements, including the assertion, Melchizedek is God in Psalm 82. Then the Day of Atonement shall follow after the 10th Jubilee period, when he shall atone for all the sons of light, and the people who are predestined to Melchizedek. Breaking the text. Upon them, breaking the text. For this is the time decreed for the year of Melchizedek's favor, and by his might he will judge God's holy ones, and so establish a righteous kingdom, as it is written about him in the songs of David. A godlike being has taken his place in the council of God. In the midst of the divine beings he holds judgment. Scripture also says about him, over it, take your seat in the highest heaven. A divine being will judge the peoples. Breaking the text. Your divine being is Melchizedek, who will deliver them from the power of Belial. The traditions of exaltation continue within the Keber Nagas, with the claim made of Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with Isaac, my servant, the son of Sarah, and in him I will bless all the nations of the earth, and I will make for him a great kingdom over all the nations of the earth, and in the heavens also I will make him king. Jacob is also elevated in status within the fragmentary work of the Prayer of Joseph. I, Jacob, who is speaking to you, am also Israel, an angel of God, and a ruling spirit. Abraham and Isaac were created before any work, but I, Jacob, whom men call Jacob, but whose name is Israel, am he who God called Israel, which means a man seeing God, because I am the firstborn of every living thing to whom God gives life. When I was coming up from Syrian Mesopotamia, Uriel, the angel of God, came forth and said that Jacob, Israel, had descended to earth, and I had tabernacled among men, and that I had been called by the name of Jacob. He envied me, and fought with me, and wrestled with me, saying that his name, and the name that is before every angel, was to be above mine. I told him his name, and what rank he held among the sons of God. Are you not Uriel, the 8th, after me, and I, Israel, the archangel of the power of the Lord, and a chief captain among the sons of God? Am not I Israel, the first minister before the face of God? And I called upon my God by the indistinguishable name. Within the text, Ezekiel the Judean, Moses is exalted and given God's very throne. On Sinai's peak, I, Moses, saw what seemed a throne, so great in size it touched the clouds of heaven. Upon it sat a man of noble mien, becrowned, and with the scepter in one hand, while with the other he did beckon me. I made approach and stood before the throne. He handed over the scepter, and he bade me mount the throne, and gave me the crown. Then he himself withdrew from off the throne. I gazed upon the whole earth round about, things under it, and high above the skies. Then at my feet the multitude of stars fell down, and I their number reckoned up. Although humans are not the only exalted figures, angels are also identified with this privilege. Of all the angels, Michael was most privy. Scholars have noted in 1 Enoch 69:15 that Michael is given an oath of God, which may refer to the name. He then revealed these to the children of the people, and all the hidden things, and this power of this oath. For it is powerful and strength itself. The evil one placed this oath in Michael's hand. We are given several descriptions of Michael in the book of Daniel as Israel's prince and protector. In Daniel 10:21, Michael is called Israel's prince. But I will tell you what it is noted in the scriptures of truth. No one upholds me against these except Michael, your prince. We read in Daniel 12:1, At that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. So we see Michael as close to God and the intercessor for Israel in various texts. In the Testament of Levi, chapter 5, verses 5 through 6, Michael is exalted and seen as interchangeable with the Lord. And I said to him, I beg you, Lord, teach me your name, so that I may call on you in the day of tribulation. And he said, I am the angel who makes intercession for the nation of Israel, that they might not be beaten. In the Testament of Dan, chapter 6, 1 through 2, we read, And now fear the Lord, my children. Be on guard against Satan and his spirits. Draw near to God and to the angel who intercedes for you, because he is the mediator between God and men for the peace of Israel. He shall stand in opposition to the kingdom of the enemy. Given his role as intercessor, it was asserted that he may be the Son of Man figure of Daniel 7:9. This may be the reason why in future traditions within the Kebranagas we see Michael being worthy of worship, and is right that we should worship Michael and Gabriel. Speaking of Gabriel, he was also venerated to the divine vice-regent slot. This is due to his assumed appearance in Daniel 10:4 through 6, although the messenger in the text is unnamed. I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. The Gabriel inscription, also called Gabriel's Revelation or Vision of Gabriel, or the Gesalison stone, is a 3-foot-tall stone tablet with 87 lines of Hebrew text written in ink, containing a collection of short prophecies written in the first person and dated to the late 1st century BCE. One of the stories allegedly tells of a man who was killed by the Romans and resurrected in 3 days. It also seems to exalt Gabriel. Who are you? I am Gabriel, the angel of the Lord. You shall rescue them. A prophet and a shepherd shall rescue you. I pray you for 3 shepherds, for 3 prophets. On the 3rd day, the sign. I am Gabriel, the King of kings, the Prince of princes, of those who are close to the courts. The sign is for him. Thus they ask you. See those who love the King. On the 3rd day, the small one that I took, I, Gabriel, the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel. Then you will stand firm forever. Raphael is also a candidate for the divine vice-regent. We see in Tobit he is one of the archangels who stands before the Lord. So now, when you and Sarah prayed, it was I who brought and read the record of your prayer before the glory of the Lord. And likewise, whenever you would bury the dead. I am Raphael, one of the 7 angels who stand ready and enter before the glory of the Lord. Raphael is also called the angel of the Lord in Tobit 12:22. They kept blessing God and singing his praises, and they acknowledged God for these marvelous deeds of his, when the angel of the Lord had appeared to them. Tobit 11:14 through 15 also reveals that Raphael may have been considered by the writers as possessing the divine name. The point offered by some scholars concerning this passage is that not only are God, his name, and all the angels blessed, but it is possible that his name is being directly addressed in context. This would mean Raphael, the angel who intervenes for Tobit, would bear the name. And he wept and said to him, I see you, my son, the light of my eyes. Then he said, Blessed be God, and blessed be his great name, and blessed be all his holy angels. May his holy name be blessed through all the ages. Though he afflicted me, he has had mercy upon me. Now I see my son Tabas. So Tobit went in rejoicing and praising God at the top of his voice. Tabas reported to his father that his journey had been successful, that he had brought the money, that he had married Raguel's daughter Sarah, and that she was, indeed, on her way there, very near to the gate of Nineveh. The angel Yael, or Yahoel, was also a strong candidate. In fact, scholarship recognizes Yael as the clearest example of divine hypostasis within Second Temple literature. His name is a combination of Yah, the abbreviated form of Yahweh, as well as El. In the Apocalypse of Abraham, the name is dwelling within him. He is said to have the ability to restrain Leviathan and to loosen Hades. I am Yahoel, and I was called so by him who causes those with me on the seventh expanse, on the firmament, to shake, a power through the medium of his ineffable name in me. I am the one who has been charged according to his commandment, to restrain the threats of the living creatures of the cherubim against one another. And I teach those who carry the song through the medium of man's night of the seventh hour. I am appointed to hold leviathans, because through me is subjugated the attack and the menace of the reptile. I am ordered to loosen Hades and to destroy those who wondered at the dead. Yael's description is also likened to God's as well. The appearance of his body was like sapphire, and the aspect of his face was like crystallite, and the hair of his head like snow. And the turban was on his head, its look like that of a rainbow, and the clothing of his garments was purple, and a golden staff was in his right hand. However, Yael also encourages Abraham to worship God with him in the rest of the Apocalypse of Abraham. A curious thing arises within the text. God is also called Yael. And while he was still speaking, behold the fire coming towards us round about, and a voice was in the fire like a voice of many waters, like the voice of a sea in its uproar. And the angel knelt down with me and worshipped. And I wanted to fall down face on the earth, and the place of the highness on which we were standing now stopped on high, now rolled away down low. And he said, Only worship Abraham, and recite the song which I taught you. Since there was no ground to which I could fall prostrate, I only bowed down, and I recited the song which he had taught me. And he said, Recite without ceasing. And I recited, and he himself recited the song. Eternal One, Mighty One, Holy El, God Autocrat, Self-Originate, Incorruptible, Immaculate, Unbegotten, Spotless, Immortal, Self-Perfected, Self-Devised, Without Mother, Without Father, Ungenerated, Exalted, Fiery, Just, Lover of men, Benevolent, Compassionate, Bountiful, Jealous over me, Patient One, Most Merciful, Eli, Eternal, Mighty One, Holy, Sabaoth, Most Glorious, El, Yahoel. You are he my soul has loved, my protector, eternal, fiery, shining, light-giving, thunder voice, lightning vision, many-eyed. Uriel is another angel that we find that is also interchangeable with God, as we see in 2 Ezra chapter 4. Then the angel that had been sent to me, whose name was Uriel, answered. Then I answered and said, But, O sovereign Lord, all of us also are full of ungodliness. Later, Uriel is also given credit for judgment in chapter 5. When I had spoken these words, the angel who had come to me on a previous night was sent to me. He said to me, Listen to me, and I will instruct you. Pay attention to me, and I will tell you more. I said, O sovereign Lord, who is able to know these things except him whose dwelling is not with mortals? He said to me, I shall liken my judgment to a circle. Just as for those who are last there is no slowness, so for those who are first there is no haste. Uriel is also present during creation and held as the creator of all things in chapter 6. He, Uriel, said to me, At the beginning of the circle of the earth, before the portals of the world were in place, and before the assembled winds blew, and before the rumblings of thunder sounded, and before the flashes of lightning shone, and before the foundations of paradise were laid, and before the beautiful flowers were seen, and before the powers of movements were established, and before the innumerable host of angels were gathered together, and before the heights of the air were lifted up, and before the measures of the firmament were named, and before the footstool of Zion was established, and before the present years were reckoned, and before the imaginations of those who now sin were estranged, and before those who stored up treasures of faith were sealed, then I planned these things, and they were made through me alone, and not through another, just as the end shall come through me alone, and not through another. So with these texts provided, I think it's easy to see what's going on, and if you ever come across them, they won't seem so weird. It also gives you the state of mind the practitioners of Judaism were in at the time Jesus was born. With these texts in mind, it's a lot easier to relate to the theological developments of the New Testament and can give us an appreciation for who Jesus is, the Cloud Rider of Daniel 7.